Before we can use our Tanzu Kubernetes clusters, we need to make sure that they'll have network access in our VMware Cloud SDDC. This lesson walks through the steps needed to properly open up firewall ports for our Kubernetes clusters. Now I want to stress that you should proceed very cautiously when going through the labs because we will allow access from the SDDC to the internet, and many organizations do not allow this type of access. Please review the configurations carefully and be sure to ask for permissions from your network security teams before allowing access to your clusters from untrusted networks. Okay, enough warnings. Let's get to it. We know that our Tanzu Kubernetes clusters are deployed on a vSphere namespace network segment. That segment is connected to a dedicated router where the NSX components are providing load balancing for any ingress traffic into the vSphere namespace segment. These IP addresses used for this load balancing are pulled from the ingress CIDR we added during activation. The router is also performing destination NAT, or network address translation, for any egress traffic leaving this vSphere namespace segment. All traffic will share an egress IP address pulled from the egress CIDR entered during activation. The Tier 1 router connects to an upstream Tier 0 router, and from there we can connect to our VMware Cloud virtual machine segments, as well as to the internet, which is where our container registry, Docker Hub, lives. Now in many enterprises, this container image registry is built in an internal network. But for this series, we didn't want to force you to build your own image registry and secure it, so we're using a public registry instead. The Tier 0 router connecting to the internet will need some firewall rules added. We'll need one rule to allow access into our Kubernetes clusters from the other virtual machine segments. We'll also need to allow outbound access to our image registry and for using Tanzu Mission Control, which will be covered later in the course. Remember to get permissions to allow any access to untrusted networks. Okay, let's hop over to my running environment where we can see our rules being created. Within the Networking and Security tab of my SDDC, we'll need to create a couple of groups. We'll create a Tanzu egress group that consists of the IP address range of my egress CIDR. And we'll create a Tanzu ingress group that contains the list of IP addresses of the ingress CIDRs. Next, we go to the gateway firewall, specifically the compute gateway. Here we'll add the first of two rules. Tanzu ingress will have a source of any to allow access from anywhere in our SDDC to the Tanzu ingress CIDR range. This basically allows all access to our load balanced IP address. If you're worried about access coming from the internet, just know that you'd also have to create a NAT address and map it to these ingress CIDRs for that to function correctly. This rule by itself does not allow access from the internet without that NAT rule, so our firewall rule only grants access from our internally routed networks. We then need to create a second rule for egress traffic where we specify the egress CIDR as the source address, and the destination will be anywhere. This gives us full outbound access to the internet and any public image registries, as well as allowing access for Tanzu Mission Control. When we're done, we'll publish these firewall rules and we're ready to continue setting up our Kubernetes clusters.